Rebonjour, je m'appelle Nick Freight et en tant que président du réseau des jeunes fonctionnaires, I would like to welcome you today to our armchair discussion entitled Federal Youth Network, Breaking Down the Barriers, as part of the Blueprint 2020 consultation recently launched by the clerk. We're happy to have a great panel with us today. So, Madame Farah Boisclair, co-chair of the National Capital Region Young Professional Network and HR professional at CIC, who will be speaking about the importance of the network. She's replacing Mr. Graham Flack this afternoon. Mrs. Edith Kehoe, Senior Director of Workforce Organization and Classification at Treasury Board Secretariat, who will discuss the topic of HR. Mr. Greg Wilburn, Director at Policy Horizons Canada, who will address the topic of new technologies. And Mrs. Deborah Tatry, Senior Director of Performance Management Initiative of Treasury Board Secretariat, who will introduce the Directive on Performance Management. In addition, we are privileged to have with us today Madame Janice Charette, Deputy Clerk of the Privy Council and Associate Secretary to Cabinet and Privy Council Office. But before we start, I have a few administrative details. Donc, les sorties d'urgence et les toilettes se retrouvent de chaque côté de la salle pour les personnes qui se retrouvent avec nous aujourd'hui dans la salle. Il y a des bénévoles de chaque côté de la salle de collaboration pour vous indiquer les endroits. We kindly ask you to put your phones and Blackberries on vibrate mode, but not to turn them off, because we strongly encourage all of you to tweet throughout the entire session today. We also encourage all of you to make sure to use the hashtag GC2020 in order for us to be able to then storify our discussion today. With that being said, I would like to welcome Madame Charette to give her opening statements.
Thanks very much, Nick. Alors, bon après-midi tout le monde. Sorry, I was just running in the door as you were starting, so maybe that's really good timing, or I don't know, not good timing. And thank you for being open enough to invite somebody who's not quite really eligible for membership in your network to talk with you today. It really is a privilege for me to be here. I think of this network and all the great work you've done over the years as an important constituency for us in the public service in terms of helping to shape the public service of today, but more importantly, given the exercise we're engaged in, pour bâtir l'avenir de la fonction publique. So the dialogue on Blueprint 2020 has been a forward-looking dialogue. It's been a constructive dialogue, and we're finding that across government, the Young Professionals Network and the student networks have been amongst the most engaged and the most vocal communities, and I congratulate you for that. We're confident that the network will also provide excellent high-caliber suggestions on how the concrete ideas about how we're going to move forward to achieve the vision. I think you all know the big tectonic forces that are behind the need for this kind of a conversation, the forces which are changing the world within which we operate, and therefore the public service needs to take a consideration of. They're well known. Just a couple of them that I think that are particularly relevant. The evidence to my left here of the more connected world that we're living in. If we were having this conversation like even 10 years ago, the ability for us to be connected with public servants across the country all at the same time would have been a dream. And now it's a reality. And I think that's such a powerful technology. That also is affecting how citizens want to interact with us, as well as the potential of how we can interact with each other, and their expectations that they can deal with us in the same 24/7 mobile paradigm as they can with their bank or with a retail institution. The transformation that's underway in terms of shifts in global economic and political power mean that our knowledge of the world has to expand to know about countries and about economies that once were more like tourist locations than potentially economic or political partners for us. The nature of the issues that we deal with are only becoming more complex in a world where change is happening very quickly, where our environment is volatile, where the future is uncertain and the approach is somewhat ambiguous. What a great place to be. Hein? Vraiment, les tâches sont tellement intéressantes, mais importantes aussi. Ces changements sociaux ont un grand impact sur la fonction publique, mais nous avons travaillé fort et avons fait de progrès au cours des dernières années pour renouveler nos organisations et bien les positionner pour l'avenir. Pour profiter de cette élan et prélever les défis futurs, nous devons avoir une vision claire et commune de notre destination et de ce que nous devons devenir dans la prochaine décennie. That idea of a shared vision across the public service about what we want to be and how we want to meet some of those big tectonic challenges is really at the core of what Blueprint 2020 is about. And that's why at the clerk's invitation, deputies came together to discuss what the public service should become in the decades ahead and what it's going to take us to get there. The work, which culminated in the production of that draft vision and that document, Blueprint 2020, Getting Started, Getting Your Views, articulates an idea, a concept, a vision for a revitalized world-class public service that's equipped to serve Canadians now and into the future. The vision has a number of principles that are set out in the document that I'm sure you're familiar with: an open and networked environment that engages citizens and partners for the public good, a whole-of-government approach that enhances service delivery and value for money, a modern workplace that makes smart use of technologies to improve networking, to improve access to data, and improve the way we deliver services to citizens and our customers, and a capable, confident, high-performing workforce that embraces new ways of working, that mobilizes the diversity of talent and of personnel that we have to serve the country's evolving needs. Élaborer cette vision n'était qu'un début. Il faut maintenant entamer le dialogue avec les employés et les mobiliser pour obtenir leur adhésion sur une grande échelle et instituer le changement. Cette vision, il faut la concrétiser et lui donner un sens pour les employés, pour nous tous. Alors, le greffier, qui a nommé le sous-ministre champion d'Objectif 2020, Louise Lavonian, ensemble, ils ont lancé le processus de mobilisation au début de juin. The event itself, that launch of the Blueprint Dialogue, generated unprecedented levels of interest, with thousands of public servants joining in from coast to coast via webcast. And I'm sure some of you were part of that, if I remember from the Storify that I saw of that event. There were 1,400 or so tweets that were sent out during that launch, which showed how eager public servants are to be part of this discussion. Since then, public servants at all levels in every department and every region have been joining the discussion and contributing to building that shared sense of direction, that vision for the public service of the future, through face-to-face meetings, through online meetings, through social media engagement, and all kinds of different forms of dialogue. Durant l'été, par exemple, l'École de la fonction publique du Canada et le réseau étudiant d'affaires autochtones et développement du Nord-Canada ont organisé une séance pour Objectif 2020. Environ 650 étudiants issus de toutes les régions du pays y ont participé et se sont engagés activement, formulant des idées sur la façon d'améliorer le programme fédéral de l'expérience de travail étudiant et rehausser la qualité des étudiants ambassadeurs dans l'université. I personally had the privilege of participating in Blueprint 2020 engagement sessions with Federal Youth Network representatives in Manitoba and Saskatchewan last week, and so I'm certainly well aware of the energy and the enthusiasm and the pent-up desire to shape that public service of the future, and to make it a place where public servants at all levels really feel like they can make the fullest contribution. In addition to those face-to-face meetings and technologically enabled meetings, we are leveraging social media really on a scale which is unprecedented in our public service to seek advice and engage employees in a dialogue. I think the clerk said something like he was scared as hell about this when he launched all of this. And well, you know what? So far, it's gone, I think, extraordinarily well. The response to date has been, my notes say impressive, I would say almost overwhelming, frankly. The Blueprint 2020 group on GC Connects now has over 2,600 members and has received over 1,700 posts and 30,000 views. So I can't talk to the people who are watching us across the country, but just in this room, how many of you are GC Connects members? Great. How many of you actually post? How many of you are lurkers? Okay. That's okay too, I guess. That's what they tell me, it's okay anyways. Maybe you'll see something which will engage your interest and spark your desire to post. There's been over 10,000 tweets, we'll add more to that today, and well over 100 substantive comments received via email. La page sur l'Objectif 2020 dans JCPedia a été visitée plus que 44 000 fois. Enfin, a créé dans les ministères et à l'échelle gouvernementale plus de 50 sous-groupes de discussion dans GC Connects. Plusieurs ministères ont créé leur propre sous-groupe, dans GC Connect, including PCO, for example. It's important to hear all views in order to ensure that the dialogue on this vision is inclusive and paints an accurate portrait of where the public service is and where people see it going. I've been keenly following these discussions. I told you I was a lurker, as well as through personal engagement and the reports of engagement sessions that have been going on in departments and agencies across the government. And I'm really pleased with the level of engagement we're seeing on GC Connects and the use of that tool. I think we're finding whether or not that's the right tool for us, and I heard lots of comments about that so far, but it's a tool that we didn't used to have before. So frankly, I think it's great progress, and the fact that we have so many people using it and demanding better tools is a sign actually of real engagement and real progress in terms of what do we need for ourselves for the future. Now, there have been some recurring themes and threads coming through all the discussions underway, like this discussion about tools. Employees are discussing whether or not we have the tools and the equipment necessary to be able to do the job we're being asked to do now. Training and development is a topic that's also generating high levels of interest. Our overall processes with respect to the management of human resources, including performance management, have been part of the conversation, as well as how best do we achieve that whole of government view? How best do we network? Do we collaborate across organizations when it feels like all the forces are those verticals within our departments and agencies, and the pressures against horizontality, unfortunately, are too strong? So for those of you who have not gotten involved in the discussion and the dialogues presently underway, I encourage you to do so. This is your chance to be heard. Pour ce qui est des étapes à venir, il faut faire l'inventaire de toutes nos activités de mobilisation. Mais peut-être plus important, l'inventaire des commentaires qu'on nous envoie en vue de la rédaction d'un rapport d'état à déposer d'ici le 15 octobre. Il faudra donc s'interroger à toute franchise sur le dialogue qui s'est déroulé jusqu'ici dans les ministères et organiser la rétroaction des employés autour des thèmes émergents. Pour des questions d'ouverture et de transparence, on affichera directement sur GCpedia tous les rapports d'étape ministérielle. And here's a little insight for you. Deputy ministers are a bit competitive. And so the fact that we're going to post on GCpedia the reports department by department, which will allow public servants across all of our organization to be able to compare and see what's going on in different departments, I think hopefully will turn that little bit of a competitive streak into a very positive force in terms of momentum as we move into the next stage of this process. Following that, what we've heard, deputies will be asked to submit a final report by early 2014, which will have more emphasis on the actions. What can be done within a department or an agency or an organization in response to what was heard throughout the engagement process? So I think here, I've got a lot of questions about, so what's going to happen? Like, how are we actually going to see action? Where is all this going to lead to? Some of this is going to have to happen within departments and agencies, because some of the challenges and some of the issues that are being raised are specific to the businesses that they're in. Some of them changes can happen within a branch or a sector or a region, or in some cases even a work unit. And I hope that we're all going to feel empowered to get on with those things. There's probably some things that are going to have to happen at that public service wide level, and that's where I think we'll all be engaged in terms of trying to figure out what those initiatives are going to be. I can share with you, though, that the engagement process already has identified some exciting new ideas, some which can be implemented in the short term, but some which will require a longer time frame to implement. We are working towards 2020, not just 2014. So we'll have to think about how we stage this and how we move it forward in a way that builds momentum and doesn't just wait for 2020 to arrive before we start. I do see this as a start of something bigger. The communication channels, I hope, will remain open now that we've kind of taken the lid off the lamp and the genie is out. I don't think we can put the lid back on here, and I think that's a good thing. I hope that engagement and that desire to be part of this dialogue on the public service will continue long past the formal end of the Blueprint 2020 process. And I think that it's a good sign of the enthusiasm and the passion that public servants have for the institution that we work in, but for the work that we do. I've said it at many tables and at many platforms, I'm an absolutely unapologetic, enthusiastic, proud public servant. I'm very proud of the work that public servants do each and every day across this country to make Canada an even greater place. And I know that the discussions that we're engaged in through Blueprint 2020 are going to help to position ourselves to help better serve Canada and Canadians in the years ahead. So I encourage you, all of you here in this room, across the country who may be watching, to take advantage of the upcoming events and the opportunities to contribute, including today in this armchair session, as well as online or in whatever process you might be invited to as part of your department or agency. Nous voulons savoir ce que vous pensez d'Objectif 2020, ce que ça signifie pour vous et ce que nous devons faire collectivement pour concrétiser notre vision. I think by talking together and by learning from public servants at all levels, and especially key discussion groups such as the Federal Youth Network, we'll find fresh ways to uphold the tradition of excellence and build on the strong foundation of public service values and ethics in order to build that public service of the future. Merci et je vous souhaite une bonne armchair discussion. Merci.
Merci beaucoup, Madame Charette. Votre participation nous démontre vraiment l'importance qu'un réseau comme le réseau des jeunes fonctionnaires peut avoir à la fonction publique fédérale d'aujourd'hui. Donc, j'aimerais à ce point, I would like to invite at this point all of our panelists to join in the front. And the first one up speaking will be, sorry about that, Farah. If you can come right to the podium, actually, and get started. Yes.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Farah Boisclair. Je suis jeune fonctionnaire fédéraux. Je travaille à Citoyenneté et Migration Canada, spécifiquement aux ressources humaines. Présentement, je m'occupe du programme je m'occupe du programme du rendement pour les cadres. Alors, c'est une belle expérience. Ça fait 1 an déjà. In terms of my experience with networks, I've had the wonderful opportunity to be a part of a network for now 5 years. I was the co-chair of my departmental network at CIC for 3 years, and then I was elected last year as a regional co-chair for the NCR-YPN, which is one of the 14 regional chapters of the Federal Youth Network. I think, I was asked here by Nick this morning to replace Graham. This morning I woke up thinking it was going to be another day at the office, and it wasn't the case. But I think me being here today is a key example of why networks are so important. Again, you're offered so many different opportunities that you wouldn't otherwise have had in your day-to-day job. I'm here essentially to tell you what the benefits of a network is. I'm personally, my personal motivation for being a part of the network is because I'm engaged. I want to contribute. I want for the public service to be better. But as I've been participating in all these different initiatives and events, it has brought so much to me in my professional background without even thinking about it. So I've been able to develop my leadership skills, but also being adaptable, like, for example, for like today. So in terms of, the general benefits of a networks, it does, they're engagement networks in themselves. I'm surrounded by very passionate individuals that are very bright, very ambitious, and that, like myself, want to contribute to the public service. And as a result, they've had the hands-on leadership experience to do different things. They're constantly pushed to coming up with innovative ideas to better the public service. And also, as a result, they've built networks along the way, both inside but outside of their day-to-day job, if you will. And they've also had working experience with people from different departments and also outside of the public service. So as a result, I think collectively as a network, we've been able to develop a skilled workforce, like a hub of skilled individuals that have different competencies and a set of innovative ideas. And as a result, I'm surrounded by people that I think will be very successful in the public service. I think we've been able to retain these people because, I've been 5 years into it, and a lot of these people are still around, still pushing, still trying to contribute. I think we've fostered change. I think we've been agents of change as well. I mean, we've pushed for change, and we're keeping pushing. I think we've been able to break down silos because we do participate in so many different events, so many different initiatives. So, in essence, I'd say that when I read the Blueprint 2020, I think it was a validation that as networks, as the Federal Youth Network, as regional networks, that we've been going towards, we've been working and going towards the right direction. Through collaboration via participation in networks, we've been able to develop a high-performing workforce, and we've been able to embrace new ways of working, oftentimes us being the guinea pigs, and we've been able to mobilize the diversity and the thoughts of different people in different sectors, different departments, to meet the business needs of the government. So I just spoke figuratively about the benefits of the public service, but I'll bring your attention to initiatives that we've put forth at a regional level. Donc, une de nos activités qui a été très bien reçue a été le camp de carrière. Donc, le camp de carrière, c'était une initiative qui a commencé en 2009. It was an event for us, by us. We put it on for us, essentially. So it was a learning day where young professionals could get together and learn about career development and how to bring their career to the next level. So it started out with networks organizing it. We were 2 networks at first, and in the last year, which was the 5th edition of Career Bootcamp, we were able to mobilize 11 networks to develop to organize the Career Bootcamp, but also we had the school now on board that helped us deliver the event. So I think in essence it shows that there's a growth there. We seized the opportunity, and now here we are with an event that's going to be held next year. It's in its 6th year, and most likely going to be national. We're working on it. Another example I'd say is Mega Connects. I think Mega Connects had a lot of success last year. It was an event put on by Health Canada. Your young professional network put it on. Essentially, it was an event that wanted to match young professionals with departmental executives. So they were able to mobilize executives across the public service and have these professionals have some one-on-one mentoring. So we had 16 executives from 16 departments, and we also had 25 departments attend Mega Connects. And this year, again, they're building. It was a great event, and they're building it. This year, they're going to host it on November 4th, and they're going to broaden their pool of executives that are going to be a part of it, and hopefully broaden the amount of people that can attend as well. The final one is near and dear to my heart. Hub Ottawa. I'm not sure how many of you have heard about Hub Ottawa. Just a show of hands in the room, maybe? Great. Okay. So Hub Ottawa launched last March 2012 in Ottawa. It is a hub of innovators, of artists, professional entrepreneurs that are developing their business to create a positive impact in the world. As Abe Greenspoon is, shout out to Abe, by the way, I think he's tuned in. He's the co-chair of the National Young Professionals Network as well with me. And we thought about, I think we did, when we were reflecting on what we've done and what's been accomplished, we thought that we did a great job at collaborating between departments, between networks. But we thought of, let's push the boundaries. There are partners out there that we can tap into. And we thought of, which organization would be best fitted for us to suit that need. And I think Hub Ottawa was the one that stood out because, it is a local hub, but it's also a global hub as well. So I think we seized the opportunity in terms of let's tap into their network. These are people that are doing great things at a local level, and you never know, if you connect the NCR-YPN members to these people, who knows what kind of innovative ideas that may be there, or opportunities. So in essence, we're looking forward to work with Hub Ottawa in the year to come, to kind of, tap into an external network and see what opportunities lay there. And we hope that our members seize the opportunities to take the NCR-YPN community to the next level. So my final thoughts for my speaking here today is for networks to keep pushing. We've been doing a great job, but we still have work to do, so keep pushing. Use GCpedia, my apologies. Use GC 2020 as an opportunity not only to propose ideas, but to implement ideas. So act on them. You have ideas, let's act on them, and let's see what the barriers are and bring them forward in this platform. But keep acting on what you're doing. And finally, we're looking to capture what we've been doing as a network, as a national network, via a visual and virtual map. So look out for that. We'll have a map of initiatives that carry through the GC 2020 vision. On that note, I'd like to thank Nick for inviting me today, and I'll look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Farah. Merci beaucoup, Farah. J'aimerais à ce point inviter Mme Kiho à venir en avant. Merci.
Hi. I'm really happy to have an opportunity to speak with you this afternoon. I think I'm the oldest person in the room. It's something that I'm getting used to doing. When I went back to school a few years ago, most of the colleagues that I was in my classes were talking about things like where they were going to get their next tattoo or piercing, and I felt like a bit of a fish out of water. Today, I'm going to talk to you about human resources, and that's an area where I feel much more comfortable. Lorsque Nick m'a demandé de participer à cet événement, je lui ai demandé s'il était vraiment certain de son affaire. J'ai dit, je ne suis ni jeune, ni un cadre qui a eu une carrière fameuse dans la fonction publique. Puis il m'a dit, oui, absolument, je veux que tu participes parce que tu es passionné et ça ne te dérange pas de poser des questions provocateurs. Alors j'ai dit, correct, et I'm really glad to be here because this afternoon what I want to do is put a few things in front of you about human resources and hopefully stimulate or provoke a little bit of passionate discussion amongst you as well. First, I'd like to emphasize that my role today is neither as an advocate nor a critic of the HR system. I work for Treasury Board Secretariat. I have spent my career in human resources, both in line and in corporate functions. I'm one of the people who worked on the Public Service Modernization Act, and so to a certain extent built the current HR system that some of you are criticizing or are not entirely satisfied with. The fourth principle of Blueprint 2020 refers to a capable, confident, and high-performing workforce that embraces new ways of working and mobilizing talent. Although that aspect of the vision is not specifically about human resources or the HR system, there's no doubt that it is an important component of it. The HR system is a means to ensure that the workforce is agile, that managers, leaders, and employees are adept and skilled, and that we have jobs and structures that support and enable competent, motivated, and empowered employees. Il y a quelques semaines, moi j'ai commencé un discours via DGC Connects. J'ai posé une question quant au système de ressources humaines et j'ai lancé un défi aux participants. Je leur ai demandé de quoi aurait l'air le système idéal des ressources humaines en 2020. Jusqu'à un certain point, j'étais un peu étonnée des réponses. Plusieurs des commentaires touchaient la dotation, la rémunération, jusqu'à un certain point la gestion au rendement. Mais bien qu'il y avait plusieurs critiques, il y avait très peu de faits qui soutenaient les commentaires. Now, I have to confess, I'm not all that surprised because finding factual information about human resources on the websites of any of the HR central agencies is a challenge at best. Personally, I use Google to find information that I need to do my work. So I said I wasn't going to criticize or advocate. That's not entirely true. We do need a central portal of HR information that employees of all ages, all groups and levels, and their various representatives can access easily so that we can find the information we need and be more efficient at it. But I digress. There was a lot of criticism about mobility in the various discussion posts, or a lack of mobility between the regions and the National Capital Region. A number of participants indicated that lack of mobility is demotivating and a bar on career advancement. I did a little bit of checking, and what I've discovered is that last year, 1,300 employees were appointed from the regions to the NCR, which is down from 2,100 the year before. Kind of understandable with everything that we were going through across the public service. I also looked at all of the internal job ads that closed during the month of September, and what I discovered is that 60% were for jobs here in the NCR. But of those, slightly less than half were open to employees across the country. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I don't really know. But I wanted to make the point that surprisingly, I think to a lot of people, area of selection is not something that is established at the center by either the Public Service Commission or by the Treasury Board Secretariat. It's a deputy head responsibility. And they establish area of selection policies based on a number of factors, including the group and level of the positions being filled, whether there's a permanent vacancy, not to mention having a reasonable pool of potential candidates. Flexibility, efficiency, and cost effectiveness also factor into their decisions. On a related point, you may be aware if you relocated to join the public service that a new recruit can receive up to $5,000 to assist them with their move. Internal moves, so employees from a region to Ottawa or between regions, may be reimbursed between $20,000 and $50,000, sometimes more, sometimes less, depending on their needs. So when a manager is establishing an area of selection for a particular vacancy to be filled, they also have to factor in the cost if there's a potential relocation that's going to come out of that appointment process. You may also wish to consider that there's no central fund for relocation. Each manager is paying that out of their own budget. Parmi les sujets qui ont reçu beaucoup de critiques via les commentaires que moi j'ai lus, étaient les bassins, or pools, et la dotation collective. Certaines personnes ont questionné l'utilité de ces mécanismes et d'autres ont exprimé que ce genre de processus et le fait qu'on crée des bassins est démotivant, démoralisant même, parce qu'ils sont plusieurs centaines qui participent à des processus, ils se qualifient, leur nom se met dans un bassin et ils ne sont pas en mesure de trouver un emploi pour être promus. I'll let you in on a little secret. If you pull up the Public Service Employment Act and you do a search or find and replace, you will not find the word pool or the word collective staffing anywhere in the legislation. Pools and collective staffing were concepts that we developed to explain how the staffing system might work once the legislation was changed in 2005. We built a straw man to illustrate the difference from interdepartmental competitions and eligibility lists. Looking around the room, I suspect that some of you were not here before 2005, so let me just explain a little bit. When we ran selection processes prior to 2005, the output of that was an eligibility list on which we ranked names in order of merit. Appointments had to be made rigorously following that order of merit. So even though number 2 might be in my office or, in my same section, if number 1 was somewhere else across the country, number 1 would get the offer and the right of first refusal before I could go to number 2. If a person was unavailable, their name remained on the list until a later point when they did become available, assuming I had another vacancy to offer. Managers could not skip or remove a name from a list unless the employee indicated in writing that he or she was unwilling and unable to accept any appointments. And this was a significant irritant for managers and employees alike. Number 3, for example, on the list was blocked from any advancement until numbers 1 and 2 had been appointed. I also read among the posts that some candidates, some employees fear that their candidacy isn't being given full and fair consideration in selection processes. They were unhappy because applications were rejected for failing to describe clearly enough how they met the screening criteria. I suspect that you already know this, but it bears repeating, I think, that the current system is founded on the principles of merit and nonpartisanship. And employees are appointed because they are qualified, not because of who they know, or their political affiliation, or who they're related to. That's one of the hallmarks of the federal public service HR system. It contributes to a stable and competent public service, and it's been in place for over 100 years. As you continue your discussions about possible changes to the HR system and what we need for the future, I think you have to not only look at the process, but also ask yourself whether the principles underlying it remain valid and are important for us to carry into the future. And if you're going to change them, what are the consequences? What are the costs associated with that? Managers, of whom I'm one, are looking for competent, capable, and high-performing employees. We're always on the lookout. Some managers put more emphasis on knowledge and experience, while others will look for the potential to learn and to develop new skills related to the work to be performed. Today's manager neither wants nor can afford to appoint someone whom they don't believe can do the job completely. With that in mind, I have to say that I'm struck sometimes by the fact that the job ads, which I look at still, contain more information in the notes or other information section than substantive content about the job itself and the qualifications required. We seem to have lost sight of the fact that job ads are intended to attract well-qualified candidates, as opposed to discouraging employees from applying. Mais permettez-moi de parler d'autres volets du système de gestion de ressources humaines à la fonction publique. Notre système actuel prévoit qu'on a 27 groupes occupationnels. Et ces groupes occupationnels regroupent une grande variété de travail à la fonction publique. On a des collets bleus, on a des ouvriers, on a des gestionnaires, on a des analystes de politique, on a des cadres de direction. Il n'y a aucun employeur au pays qui a une aussi diverse main-d'œuvre que nous éprouvons actuellement à la fonction publique fédérale. Management assigns work. Employees don't get to pick and choose. I know that sucks. There are days where I would really like to pick and choose what I do, this morning being a good example. I really didn't want to work on a deck and a briefing note for the minister, but that's what I had to do. There are other things that I think I would have found a lot more enjoyable than having to rush to get that done, knowing I had to come here and I hadn't finished my speaking points. But that said, management assigns work, and that work is then classified in a hierarchy. It ranges from the less to the most complex. The classification level is tied to the rate of pay, which for most of you has been negotiated in a collective bargaining process. With the exception of a very, very small segment of the public service, jobs are not classified around people, nor what they bring to the work. The current system is predicated on a particular model for organizing and valuing work. Whether the model remains relevant and enables the workforce of the future is something that you will want to look at and talk about. There is not an infinite amount of money to be spent on salaries and benefits. Consequently, the government has to find other means for controlling the wage bill. Job classification is the most important mechanism we have to serve that purpose. Admittedly, so too does workforce reduction, but I think you'll all agree that it's a lot more, shall we say, uncomfortable approach to managing the wage bill, or at least unpleasant. Je suis d'accord avec plusieurs intervenants qu'il y a peut-être un système qui pourrait être plus attirant pour nous. C'est-à-dire, si moi je t'ai payé selon mes compétences et ce que moi j'amène à un emploi, ça serait, à mon avis, avantageux. C'est-à-dire, peut-être que je toucherais le salaire d'un EX5 plutôt qu'un EX2. But would that be reasonable or responsible? Can the public service fulfill its obligation to provide work or equal pay for work of equal value if we are all compensated based on what we bring to the job? Would it be fair and transparent? Would employees be more focused on competing with each other to show what they can accomplish in order to get more pay? Or would we lose that concept of, the whole being bigger than the sum of its parts and being able to deliver programs and services for Canadians that are responsible and reasonable and effective? Would such an approach give us the predictability that we need to be able to control costs, to be responsive to Canadian taxpayers? And are you willing to lose some of your salary if you don't have a stellar year? I don't have answers to all of those questions, but I think that there's things that you need to think about before you start making proposals about changing the system by which we classify and compensate each other, or employees in the public service. En décembre 2011, le président du Conseil de Trésor a déposé un rapport au Parlement concernant l'examen législatif de la loi sur la modernisation de la fonction publique. Je ne propose pas de passer à travers toutes les recommandations, il y en avait beaucoup, mais j'aimerais vous parler brièvement du dernier chapitre du rapport, la conclusion du rapport. The report noted that despite 50 years of studies, reports, recommendations, and changes to the public service, we still faced many of the same challenges in human resources that had been around for, let's say decades. Had the pursuit been aimed at the wrong issues? What was missing? The review team concluded that it was not so much what was being changed, but more about how the changes were being implemented and how change was pursued. The report contained a proposition for change. It was aligned around 4 themes. The first of these was the foundational and shared values of the organization, which includes a shared vision of the goals to be pursued. Values endure beyond budgets and planning cycles, and they help decision makers make choices and navigate the operational complexities we encounter daily in the workplace. Blueprint 2020 sets out a vision for the future. How effectively it's communicated and how committed we are to reaching the destination are crucial to successful change. Le rapport a donné un deuxième thème qui était les relations. Les relations sont les moyens que les organismes et les individus interagissent et collaborent afin d'atteindre un objectif particulier. Les relations peuvent prendre des formes différentes. Ils peuvent être là parce que la loi l'exige, mais ça ne veut pas dire qu'automatiquement les relations sont solides. In order to make relationships meaningful, active, and results-oriented, you have to work at them. They don't just happen. They require effort, and they need to be nurtured. They're typically built on trust, which must be earned, and credibility, which must be demonstrated. The third theme in the report or in the proposition was competence, and by that, competence had a slightly different meaning than we normally give it. The report described competence as meaning individuals and organizations that not only understand their roles and responsibilities, but were willing and able to fulfill them confidently and capably, and to be held accountable for their actions. In this context, competence was about more than knowledge. It was also about openness, commitment to learning, a willingness and capacity to innovate and experiment, and perhaps most importantly, a readiness to act. What I've seen of the Federal Youth Network and a lot of the discussions on GC Connects suggests to me that we're at a point where people are willing to demonstrate competence. They are willing to look for change and to take responsibility for it. The last area in the proposition for change was wiring. It referred to the skeleton of the HR management system that connects and supports people and organization. It can include anything from the physical infrastructure and machinery to legislation, policy, training, technology, and tools. Wiring is a means to enable competence consistent with the values. À la fonction publique, nous aimons beaucoup le câblage ou l'infrastructure. lorsqu'il faut mettre en place des changements, des modifications, la première chose qu'on suggère, c'est un changement d'une politique ou d'une loi ou d'une organisation. Je pense que c'est attirant pour nous parce que les changements qu'on peut apporter dans ce domaine-là sont tangibles. On peut les toucher, on peut les prendre en main. Cependant, on vérifie rarement si les changements qu'on a apportés ont eu le résultat ou ont atteint l'objectif souhaité. Now, that doesn't mean that changes to wiring should be dismissed, not at all. They're often necessary to achieve objectives or goals. But on their own, they're insufficient and sometimes even counterproductive or counterintuitive. The report suggests that the four themes are linked. Regardless of the quality of the relationship, it can't make up for a lack of competence or an absence of shared values. Likewise, all the policies, tools, and technology in the world will not help us achieve our objectives if we don't have a good sense of where we're headed. Imagine for a second a foosball table. There are four arms on a foosball table, and you push and pull them together simultaneously in order to try and score a goal. Well, for us, these four themes were likewise aligned, and they need to be operated or manipulated simultaneously in order to move us closer to our goal of successful change. What does that have to do with Blueprint 2020 and HR management? A lot. I think that the proposition for change, which I've just described briefly, might help you frame your discussions and recommendations with regard to the fourth principle of Blueprint 2020. Ask yourself whether the vision for 2020 is clear. What are the underlying values? And will they help guide you towards an objective? Is there a shared understanding? What's your desired end state? And how will you know when you've reached it? Do you have the right relationships in place among managers, employees, bargaining agents, senior officials, HR advisors? And practically speaking, are employees at all levels willing and able to take action and be accountable for their decisions? Finally, are your discussions focused only on the wiring, or have you also looked beyond systems and structures and processes to the underlying principles, policies, and relationships? I expect, I hope, to have retired from the public service by 2020. J'ai déjà 55 ans, j'ai 35 ans de service. Cependant, je reste ici pour l'instant parce que je trouve que on a une très belle opportunité de travailler ensemble pour atteindre un objectif. Et moi, je suis convaincue qu'ensemble, nous pouvons avoir un effet positif sur la fonction publique. Merci.
Merci beaucoup, Mme Kehoe. Maintenant, c'est le tour de M. Wilburn de présenter son discours.
Good afternoon, bon après-midi. Je m'appelle Greg Wilburn et je suis un des directeurs de recherche et prospective à Horizon des politiques du Canada. For those of you who aren't familiar with Horizons, we're the federal government's foresight organization. So while the majority of the policy community looks 2 to 3 to 5 years out, we're the ones who actually occupy the 10 to 15-year space. Policy Horizons was created in 2011 to provide deputy ministers and departments with longer-term policy research to support improved planning and decision-making. And we're very fortunate to be under the tutelage of the Department of Employment and Social Development Canada. Mais nous avons aussi un comité directeur de 9 sous-ministres représentant les comités de politique de la conseil privé, ainsi que des organisations clés incluant l'École de la fonction publique, Statistique Canada et le Conseil du Trésor. Scanning and foresight is a highly collaborative process that requires the knowledge and insight of a very diverse group of people in order to produce meaningful results. And you may be asking yourself why a guy with 25 years experience in political science, environmental law and policy and foresight is here to talk about technology. The reason is that Horizons is a bit of an experiment in government. So I'm going to talk about how we use technology to support our work. I'm going to talk about some of the challenges we found, because as with any experiment, you often evaluate your results as much by your challenges as you do by your successes. And then I'm going to talk about some of what we see coming, because our last foresight study that we produced for the Deputy Minister community was actually on the future of technology. So the vision of technology proposed in BP 2020 is an ambitious one. Seamless services, open access, standardized technological infrastructure with supporting applications and systems, interoperability, supportive workplace 2.0. I suspect that the Shared Services Canada people lost a few nights' sleep when that was published. But to be frank, it's not unattainable. I'm going to start out by giving you a little bit of an overview of scanning and foresight. It's a discipline that applies a structured approach to identify how change is occurring, how that change might be occurring now, or how it's likely to occur, and how that change will affect the future. La plupart des données et des tendances fournissent une image plus ou moins fiable des 2 de 5 prochaines années. Ça, c'est le focus pour la plupart des analystes en gouvernement. Beyond that, the level of complexity and the potential for other factors to bring about unexpected change rises considerably. Scanning identifies those factors that are likely to introduce complexity into the system. Foresight is the rigorous approach used to examine those factors, test assumptions, examine change drivers, and develop plausible scenarios. Together, the two approaches support better understanding of emerging policy challenges, possible opportunities, and potential data gaps. Horizon de Politique Canada est un groupe de seulement 25 fonctionnaires qui ont examiné le futur des politiques de l'économie, des médias sociaux, de l'environnement et la compétitivité, et même le futur de la fonction publique. That is a small pool to draw upon when you are trying to examine and anticipate how the future may be different. Although it's a very diverse group, it's sometimes insufficient to meet the knowledge needs of the issues we explore on behalf of the Deputy Minister community. So how do you broaden your reach when the issues you're asked to explore go beyond the immediate expertise of the group that you have to work with? Horizon a mis en place un espace de travail virtuel, mieux connu sous le nom de ClearSpace, qui permet au personnel d'Horizon de créer, publier et modifier le contenu de documents. En ce moment, nous avons plus de 3300 utilisateurs. So, what is unique is that access can be expanded beyond just the scope of the project itself to participants across government, to participants across governments, to participants across interest groups, to participants around the world. And in fact, we have participants that are involved from Australia, Singapore, Korea fairly regularly in our research. The ClearSpace allows the creation of virtual workspaces, virtual working groups, blog posts, discussion forums, events, and polls. It is highly flexible. It is at the same time social media, an office suite, and a project planning and feedback mechanism. And it cooperates now with Microsoft Office. It did not in the past. But how does such a system function in practical terms? Recently, Policy Horizons, as part of its work on the transformative potential of new technologies, began a project to examine the impact of biotechnology and genomics on Canada's future. Now, that's a particular issue area where you need specialized knowledge in order to be able to accurately assess the impact of those areas on Canada's future. So in addition to the immediate project team, which was composed of 6 Policy Horizons employees, we established a broader working group on biotechnology and genomics that included specialist representatives from 19 federal departments. And we leveraged that participation using the ClearSpace. Au fur et à mesure que nous franchissons les étapes du projet, les spécialistes nous ont aidés à construire le contenu par l'entremise de rencontres face à face ainsi que virtuellement. And this is an important consideration. is that having the virtual tool does not mean that it's going to replace the face-to-face component of your work. However, ClearSpace's flexibility and versatility have resulted in some interesting pilot projects across government. Among other communities of interest that are using ClearSpace right now is the Federal Youth Network, is the National Managers Community, and is the Office of the Chief Human Resources Officer. In fact, we have a community of 400 practitioners who actually develop and test official languages policy via the ClearSpace. And that's just the beginning. Okay, and I entitled this part of the presentation, "And It Works Flawlessly," right? And now for the punchline. Technology is not the answer to every collaboration challenge you are going to face. In fact, there have been a few major challenges. Number one, having the technology does not mean it's going to get used. Number two, having a virtual workspace does not mean that every user will use it the same way. And last but not least, impact on established systems can be somewhat unexpected. With respect to the first issue, some will be quite comfortable interacting online. We find, generally speaking, that we've got a fair number of power users. Some are going to learn, and some will never adapt. But this is true of any tool. Each individual's approach to their work is unique. Providing them with the tool does not necessarily mean they're going to use it exactly how it was intended. So you need to make sure that you've got flexibility built into your approaches. Generally, we apply the power law. And that means in any community of practice, there will be power users, 1%. 9 to 10% who are regular contributors, and 90% who are lurkers. Now, shifting those numbers takes time and planning, and believe it or not, interacting face-to-face to build understanding and trust. You cannot do it online. En ce qui concerne le second point, certains individus seront très à l'aise avec la transparence et les possibilités de collaboration qu'un tel outil présente, mais d'autres, non. Par conséquent, vous avez besoin d'approches qui donnent aux individus la capacité d'expérimenter, jouer et s'adapter à leur propre temps. Et enfin, il faut que les règles d'engagement soient claires et qu'ils soient appliqués d'une manière constamment et égale. You cannot run a system like this without there being some oversight. With respect to the last issue, many of us with long careers in public service are accustomed to hierarchy. You look at your work every day and you understand that as a junior analyst, you have a senior analyst you are responsible to. You have a manager above that, a director general, an ADM, a deputy minister. That hierarchy ensures that there are checks and balances in the system as proposals are moved up through the system. Having a process like ClearSpace, having a tool like ClearSpace can have a significant impact on that, because all of a sudden, if everyone has access to everything that you're posting, that eliminates some of the steps in the hierarchy. And that in itself can be a disincentive to open collaboration and have impacts for existing chains of command. So I guess in some respects, I'm going to echo what Edith said, and that is, before you move into new territory, make sure you consider the consequences. So what's coming? As I've mentioned, Policy Horizons is not only experimenting with new technologies, but we're conducting foresight research on them as well. Donc, j'aimerais terminer en vous incitant à consulter notre plus récente étude. Recently, we published our second metascan, which is called Building Resilience in the Transition to a Digital Economy in a Networked Society. And although the whole report is interesting, shameless plug, there are 4 policy challenges that as a government, that as a public service, we need to reflect on. The first is virtual work. As sites like eLancer and freelancer.com evolve and change the global work landscape, what will be the implications for countries like Canada, in particular for current domestic employment models? In the 10 to 15 year time frame, the labor market is likely to be far more global. The second is the drive to collaborate. There's no doubt that the demand among stakeholders for participation in decision-making is going to continue to grow in the face of social media and digital collaboration tools. How are we as a public service going to respond? Third, the internal and external pressures for networked government, both across the federal government and among various levels, is growing. The challenge is that, for the most part, structures and accountabilities have traditionally been vertical rather than horizontal. How will technology help address those particular challenges? And finally, and this is a big one, Canadians' expectations for customized, individualized service are being driven by the services they receive from Amazon, Google, among others. How or should governments aspire to meeting that standard? I encourage all of you to read the study and reflect on the challenges as you continue to show leadership in the renewal of the public service by participating in Blueprint 2020. Je vous encourage fortement d'engager dans cette importante proposition et je vous souhaite une bonne après-midi.
Merci beaucoup, M. Wilburn. Et maintenant, c'est le tour à Mme Tatry.
Hi, well, thank you for the invitation to participate today. Mon principal objectif a été de mise en place la nouvelle directive sur la gestion de rendement. Two fundamental points on performance. The work of everybody and every employee counts. And all employees, regardless of their level, need to know the work they're expected to do and how they're doing. And I think what we found as we started the project to put in place the Directive on Performance Management was that many times we're hearing, I don't know how I'm doing until it comes to a performance review. I'm not getting feedback during the year. So I think that's a really critical point to do that. In developing the directive and in planning the implementation, we've learned that performance management can do more than any other tool to optimize the workforce potential and productivity that you hear about in 2020. Cela s'explique par le fait que la gestion de rendement permet de garantir que les gestionnaires fournissent continuellement la rétroaction, l'encadrement et du soutien aux employés. Il s'agit d'un engagement commun. It requires managers to document expectations and employees' progress, while ensuring that interventions to support the employee performance and improvement wherever they fit on the performance spectrum are timely, strategic, and effective. In looking at the four guiding principles of Blueprint 2020, which have been talked about earlier, performance management will be a key tool in achieving the capable, the high-performing workforce that embraces new ways of working and mobilizes the diversity of talent to meet evolving business needs. Comme vous le savez peut-être, tous les employés seront tenus d'avoir un entente de rendement signé le 1er avril prochain. The directive impacts 206,000 employees in the public service, in the core public administration. It also involves 65,000 managers and supervisors across the core public administration. And this is going to be critical to ensuring that these managers understand their roles and responsibilities and how they're there to support, and the tools that they're going to have to do that. Les ententes de rendement préciseront notamment les objectifs de travail, les compétences essentielles comme les comportements, et les plans d'apprentissage et de perfectionnement. What I would like to focus on is the learning and career development aspect of the employee's performance and maximizing that performance. There's been a lot of concern expressed as the directive has come out about performance management driving up the demand for learning, training, and development when budgets are tight. There's also a concern that employees may not have a strong enough sense of ownership for their learning, that it shouldn't be up to the employer entirely, especially for learning targeted to career development. And I think the Youth Network has a bunch of really great examples in talking to Nick about ways that the career development piece is being worked on, is being developed, and you're doing it yourselves. And I think that that really shows the initiative and the way that we want to go and that we see in terms of performance management. what I would really appreciate hearing from you are your ideas on high impact on-the-job learning. Ideas for learning activities and interventions that can help employees improve their work performance and master their jobs. Je crois que cet aspect est particulièrement important, étant donné la vitesse à laquelle les technologies, dans les médias sociaux, changent notre façon de faire notre travail. With the new directive, there will be much closer attention to more rigorous annual employee performance assessments. And these won't just look at whether the employee has completed the work objectives. Employees will also be assessed on how they do their work, how well they interact with their colleagues, how well they use the workplace tools and technologies to connect with one another and produce results, how willing and able they are to adapt technological change and embrace new ways of working. J'aime toutefois que les évaluations de rendement révéleront que bon nombre d'employés ont besoin d'approfondir leurs connaissances à cet égard, dans l'application des technologies pour améliorer leur productivité et leur efficacité quotidienne. So how would you support that learning? What kinds of interventions would you be thinking about? What should we be encouraging departments to provide, managers and supervisors to include in learning and development plans for employees who need learning to improve their performance? One of the ideas that your community has put forward or has been advancing is the reverse mentoring. And I'm really intrigued by that concept because I suspect it would really help us improve the agility of our workforce, particularly in regards to the use of effective technology. I'm sure you have others, and I'm looking forward to hearing about them. Thanks.
Merci. Donc, j'aimerais remercier tous nos panélistes aujourd'hui. And now I would like to open the floor to questions. For participants joining us via webcast, please submit your question by pressing the participant button located at the top right hand of your screen. Someone is monitoring the inbox and will read the questions to our guests on your behalf. Please specify your question if general or specific to one speaker. I would also like to remind everyone that we're accepting questions via Twitter this afternoon. So please use the hashtag GC2020 so that we can actually make sure that we have an opportunity to ask the panelists. Donc,
Okay, so we'll take the first question. It's for Ms. Kehoe. La question, en fait, c'est les processus sont souvent très longs, processus de sélection. Quelles mesures peuvent être prises pour permettre des résultats plus rapides?
C'est une question excellente. Vraiment, le contrôle du processus, la longueur du processus, relève du gestionnaire et son conseiller, sa conseillère en ressources humaines. C'est une question de volonté. Il faut faire du temps pour mener un processus efficace, efficient et rapide. Par exemple, je pense que plusieurs personnes pensent que les délais sont imposés par la loi sur l'emploi de la fonction publique, mais si vous prenez une copie de la loi puis vous passez à travers, vous verrez qu'il n'y a aucune mention des délais à l'intérieur de la loi. Il s'agit vraiment de la bonne planification, de mettre de l'effort, de l'énergie et vraiment de mettre le temps nécessaire pour que le processus de gestion devienne priorité numéro 1 pour le gestionnaire responsable.
Nous allons prendre une question ici dans la salle. Je vais vous demander de vous identifier, s'il vous plaît.
Hello. My name is Mel, and this question is for Edith. It's also in relation to the previous question that was just asked. What do you think in terms of AS pools having an expiry date? As you say, processes take very long. They can take from anywhere from 6 months to a year, and if you're not the successful candidate, you get put into a pool. But then those pools expire, and it's a lot of work on the part of HR and on the part of the candidate to qualify in those pools.
I hate pools. But that's not really an answer to your question. Under the previous legislation, eligibility lists expired after a year. They could be renewed for an additional year. So they had a lifespan of 2 years. And the reason that they did that, and the reason that even today we continue to put sort of an expiry date on the pool, is that managers are always looking for the people who are the right fit for the job. people who were qualified 2 years ago, they're still qualified, but there may be other candidates out there who are equally qualified, who deserve a crack at the promotion, or who perhaps have better qualifications. And as a hiring manager, I always want the most competent people that I can find to do the job. It's not fun. It's probably not fair for people that have invested a lot of time and energy, and thank you very much for acknowledging that HR puts a lot of effort into it. But the reality is that we should constantly be refreshing them. The whole concept of having a basin or an inventory of well-qualified candidates, in my opinion, really necessitates us constantly refreshing the pool. I would rather look at it as an inventory that I'm constantly restocking, and as opposed to saying that it expires. I would like to see it have a, an infinite lifespan, but constantly be refreshing it.
OK, une autre question?
This is a question for the whole panel from the webcast. With relation to reverse mentoring, how exactly would this work?
I'll speak a little bit to it. The Federal Youth Network does have a page on GCpedia and an inventory of mentors and mentees, and they use it. They use it to match people, and they use it to match people. So that's how it works. We're using technology to facilitate that process. So I invite you to go on GCpedia and check it out. But I personally, it's not my initiative, but I think it's been a great success. And I'm not sure whether there's been any report on results and how effective it has been and how the relationships have carried through. But there are ways out there to do reverse mentoring. I don't know if you wanted to add on that.
Maybe I can just add a little bit on what Farah is mentioning. So it is on our GCpedia site, and you'll find it for each of the regions. So there's people there that have put their names down for specific skill sets, and you can get the information and contact that person directly. But in an informal setting of reverse mentoring, it really has to be a best fit. So you try it out and you see if the relationship works. It has to be something that's natural and not forced. So that's how it usually functions with the list that's right now up on GCpedia.
I think there's some more opportunities too with that, because I think the reverse mentoring, we've used it in a very informal way, I know, in some of the projects that I've been on, where you have, and I don't want to use the word older employees, but more senior employees who maybe don't have that technology base, but yet you have a lot of the younger employees that are coming in that do. And I think it sort of falls back to some of the work at Horizons where, you need somebody to show you that piece. It's not something that just sort of becomes automatic because it's in place. And I think that that's been a really key piece, I know, in certain projects to bring people along so that you can really maximize the technology and try to work more efficiently than we do, with a lot of the technology that we have.
I was going to say that one of the approaches that we use, that we've experimented with at Horizons, is instead of providing training on ClearSpace, we assign people partners. So that rather than attending a specific session on how to use the tool, they're encouraged to play with it, and then when they have questions, they've got a resource person that can respond. And it's actually proven more efficient in some respects than formal training, because people get the hands-on, the experience of using the tool, and then they know where they need to fill in gaps in their own knowledge.
My experience with reverse mentoring is a little bit different, I think, from the rest of the people on the panel. I have no personal knowledge of a formal reverse mentoring program, but I consider that every day when I go to the office, the 24 people that work with me are my reverse mentors. They're all younger than I am. They all have different skill sets from me. And every day is a learning opportunity.
J'ai une autre question ici maintenant pour Madame Tatry. Si vous pouvez, if you can enlighten us a little bit about the possibility of seeing a 360 in the future as far as evaluations.
Oh, since we've been going out and doing consultations, around the implementation of the directive, that's been one of the key things that people have asked for, is to have a 360 process that is, that there are 360 processes that are available right now, but it's up to the individual who's being evaluated to choose the people they wish to give them the 360. Not always the most effective way to get good comments back in terms of where your weaknesses or where your strengths are. So one of the things is HRSDC, their new name, is actually, I can never remember, ESDC, are actually piloting a mentoring program, a 360 with their managers this year. And it's something that we're going to be looking at and then could potentially roll out further. But it's certainly been something that other public and private sectors have found incredibly valuable and needs to be done with a rigor and a consistency that is going to provide the feedback it needs to managers and give employees that opportunity to provide that comment.
Thank you. Amanda?
Hi, my name is Amanda. I'm an HR advisor at Natural Resources Canada. And I have a question for you, Ms. Coe, about, so a lot of the buzz that we're hearing is about HR mechanisms and how they need to be changed and adapted, and you alluded to that, or you talked specifically about that anyway. So my question is, as an advisor, I know that there are a lot of mechanisms out there and flexibilities out there that in fact can respond to the issues that people are raising. And so I'm wondering, in your view, what's the best thing that we can do to promote those and better demystify the tools that exist so that people can better understand the system and leverage the tools that exist?
Oh. We don't have enough time for me to be able to give you the full list, but I mean, I've been watching the Twitter feed and someone talked about a Q&A for a selection process. Been there, done that about 5 years ago. You can do group sessions, you can do different kinds of interviews, you can do different kinds of selection. The list is so long. The thing is that we go with what we know. We go with what is comfortable and what we think is going to cause the least amount of fuss and the least amount of blowback from employees and bargaining agents and Public Service Commission and OCRO and even management. You really need to find, as an HR advisor, a manager, a client who wants to try something different, who's prepared to take a little bit of a risk of working with you to explore the opportunities, because it's unlimited what you can do. The flexibility is there within the HR system, whether we're talking about staffing or classification or any other discipline. It really takes time, energy, commitment, willingness.
Thank you.
Go for it.
Monsieur?
It's more of a general comment on Blueprint 2020. I've read over the document and I've spoken with my coworkers about it, and most of the general feeling is that, okay, it lacks details, it's very general. It seems like a lot of fluff. So we're wondering, are you going to throw funding behind it? Are there going to be more specifics? I just find it generally lacking as a document. So I think the biggest thing that I find in my organization is a lack of trust when it comes to reading these documents. After you've been in the public service for a while, there is that general malaise and that feeling that, well, we do all of this stuff, but does anything change? And I kind of would like to reserve judgment on Blueprint 2020 till 2015. It's always subject to change. So just, is there going to be an honest push towards getting some of these things done and more specifics on them in general?
Okay, well, like Madame Charette mentioned during her presentation before, is that it's really an ongoing process. It's not to be seen, it was meant to be generic because it wasn't meant to influence the voices of any of us. So really to give us an opportunity for us to address what the concerns were. They weren't going in there with the pre-identified themes. So it was really for us to come up with the themes that matter, and hence the reports that will be handed in by each of the departments and agencies across government. So like the consultations are happening all the way until October 15th, and even then, once those reports are published publicly, they'll still be not concrete in the sense where they're going to repost them in the sense really to give a chance to all of us to say, did we get it right? Did we hear and understand what was going on inside the consultations? So before an actual action plan will be made sometime at the beginning of the new calendar year. So that's the process in itself. But it was really designed to be general without any specifics in order to come up and generate what were our main concerns. Like our panel today is the perfect example. The Federal Youth Network has 60,000 members across the country, and we wanted to see what mattered to our members. And the reason why these panelists are sitting there, because these were the topics of interest, the themes that were coming out from the pillars that were actually presented.
I'd like to add on that too. I think it takes a shift in how you view Blueprint 2020. I think a lot of people are viewing it as an exercise to propose ideas, and the ideas are going to get approved, then we're going to get funding, then we're going to have to implement, figure out implementation, then deal with different obstacles. I think we just need to, it is a great piece, it is a great vision piece, but I think we need to seize the opportunity to see it as, you know what, this is a piece that supports my visioning in terms of ideas, in terms of implementing it right now. I think as a network, we experiment a lot with what we have. So a lot of us don't have any budgets. We don't have budgets, but we come up with ideas, we implement them, we move forward. So change, I think, is happening right now. It was happening 5 years ago, and we're still pushing. So I think as an employee, I see it in my capacity because of what I do in the Federal Youth Network and at the regional level. But I think as an employee, I think it's important for you to identify what the opportunities are and for you to be the champion of that and to push through. And again, you will come upon barriers, but I think there's different ways to navigate around those barriers, and I think participating in networks like ourselves is a way to do that. We almost work in a different realm, if you will. We're pushed to innovate with very little resources, but we also achieve success. So I think it takes a shifting in attitude in how you view Blueprint 2020. Like yourself, I do have some concerns around it, but I don't let that stifle what I can do. I can only control myself, my attitudes, what I put forward. That's it for me.
Thank you.
I think Farah just touched on what I described as the fourth lever in the report about competence. It's not just about being willing to participate, it's about taking action yourself. So we can't afford to just wait for somebody else to do it for us, for somebody else to actually come up with the tools or the systems. If we see an opportunity, I think that each of us, to the extent that we're able within our organizations and that we have the appropriate authority, takes action, takes ownership, and tries to make the system better.
I think it's also about awareness too.
Yeah.
You know, having that awareness, because when you work in government for as many years as I think some of us up here have, there's opportunities that come along, and you have to be aware of everything that's going on and how that can fit into that. And I think Blueprint 2020, I mean, as Edith has said, there's been a lot of reports in the past about HR, but it's looking for that opportunity to put them in place and the support that could happen, you know, through something like 2020.
And there's one other point to reflect on, and that is when you go back and you look at some of the other renewal initiatives that have been undertaken, like La Relève, like PS 2000, like PS Renewal. A lot of those were often top-down exercises. There were limited opportunities for internal bottom-up engagement. And this process has been characterized by a very different sort of ethos. And, you know, I'm reminded of when the clerk announced the initiative, he said he was terrified. And you know, there's only one thing worse than not asking the question, and that is not knowing. And the question's been asked, and we've got a vision that arguably is attempting to cover the work, the commitment, the dedication, the values of an extremely diverse group of people. And there is no way, when you are trying to cover 260,000 separate individuals, that you're necessarily going to cover every eventuality. But I think it strikes a good balance, and it started a very useful conversation, and I've been very pleased to be part of it.
Thank you. We'll take one final question from the audience.
This is just a comment. My name is Maureen Gittins. I'm from the Canadian Space Agency, so I'm in from Montreal. So I want to thank Nick for getting me onto social media, Twitter. That's how I was first introduced. So I'm going to echo Nick's and Farah's, volunteerism in terms of the youth network. Yes, it is good. It is great to collaborate. It's wonderful. But coming from such a secure environment that I work in, because I have ITAR clearances, I have secret clearances, I'm still not sure that, and this is echoing Edith's and Greg's hesitation about social media, I think. I think I heard some hesitation there. Not sure any of my work would ever go on any of those GC tools. I don't even think my organization would allow it, but I don't even think I would put on it because I've been put the fear's been in me that I could be, prosecuted under the Terrorist Act if I released any secrets. I'm not joking, for the US. So, but everything GC, all these GC 2020 issues, I only found out about them like this year, because for 15 years my head's been up in the clouds in space and doing all the kinds of things with NASA people and JAXA, a Japanese space agency, and European Space Agency. So that was phenomenal, but this GC stuff, this is great. I've met a bunch of people on the networking circuit, and I'm telling you, social media has been fantastic in terms of getting me on the scene and getting me networking in Ottawa. So thank you, everybody, for opening up these issues and bringing these to the forefront. Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen, for your comment. On behalf of everyone here today, I would like to extend a sincere thank you to our speakers, Madame Charette, Madame Boisclair, Madame Quiho, Monsieur Wilburn, and Madame Tatry, for their very informative sessions. And before we go, we also would like to invite everyone to continue the conversations via our GC tools. So please continue commenting, as we're also as a network getting ready for October 15 in order to really deliver that vision. And it really does start with us. So, and also I just want to say thank you again for making us top trending in the country again. I think that's pretty unbelievable that we can do that. So it actually shows how much we do care and how much it matters. And follow us on Twitter, both at the network and all of us members of the executive team at the Federal Youth Network. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup à tous.